from about 4 hours ago.
Yeah, fair.
I'm so sorry. Are we live?
We are currently live, yes.
And I just farted.
The live stream may not, of course.
You're doing it wrong. I got all mine out before I joined, mate.
I have too many.
Oh, dear.
Oh. Who's ready to talk about, not race, qualifying?
I think that's going to be a main theme of this podcast.
Because that wasn't a race, guys. That was qualifying.
No. I'm conflicted because I think my feelings on sprint qualifying, Tom. I actually quite enjoyed it.
Oh yeah,
I still hate it, but I enjoyed it.
Don't get me wrong. I think the sprint event adds something to F1, but calling it qualifying, get out the door. Don't come back.
I think it's just the way the weekend's set up because the way it is at the moment. FP2, you may as well just not bother going out because you're not. You can do your race runs, but you'll have equivalent sort of data from the not sprint race anyway. Yeah, so just the not sprint race, it's just I think if they swap actual qualifying and FP2 around, and then that would fix it. I think. Yeah.
I do get that they're trying to do action over, have action more spread over the weekend. But I think it runs the risk of getting a bit gimmicky. Also,
and it's only going to get worse with even more next year. I think we've got 6 lined up for next year, don't we?
Yeah. Also, here's a thought for you. Obviously, we have the award for most overtakes in the season. I think it's the Crypto.com award. Will overtakes in the sprint event count for it or not? Because it's not technically a race.
That's a good point. That's a very good point. I don't know.
Because I think if they stipulate that it's overtakes during a race, because you don't have overtakes during qualifying, and given this is deemed a qualifying event, surely it doesn't. Surely that doesn't count. I mean,
it shouldn't. If it does, that's backwards in itself. But
if it does, that's even more of a joke than it is for awarding points for qualifying.
Yeah. It needs some work because at the moment it doesn't really do it for me. And as you say, they call it qualifying. It's not, it's a race. But
I mean, we had a formation lap. We had lights out. We had a set number of laps or race distance. What about that? It felt like I'm sorry, I was watching a race. I wasn't watching a qualifying session.
Yeah.
I mean, Brundle kept calling it a race. It was
just
a race.
Before I mean, I think I'm not. I guess they all have to sort of behave themselves in terms of how they talk about it. But you get the impression that Martin, especially, isn't 100% on board with the format and the way it is at the moment. I think he enjoys it. Like, you get the impression that it's he enjoys it. But I just I'm not sold on it being called a sprint race. But
sprint qualifying, you mean?
Sorry, sprint qualifying.
Exactly.
See, this is the problem. This is the problem.
You cannot call it a race. You cannot call it a race.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. But it's like I can't remember what I was going to say because I've just seen a post from Alfa Romeo where they said, "Good job from Antonio today. He got P13, which is decent. So he's up one position, but Kimi's down to 18th." Did you
at the behest of Italian Jesus too?
Yeah. I mean, we all saw the post that Haas put up replying to Mercedes. That was brilliant.
Was that the Simpsons meme?
Yeah, the Simpsons meme.
Yeah.
But did you
at
see
least it's almost as if they've become fully self-aware of just their own incompetence when it comes to when it comes to Formula One. They're just they're owning it now. Why not?
To be honest, I mean, they're just embracing it because they know they've got like, God, what, 3 races left after tomorrow?
Yeah, so we've got the human rights violations trilogy, parts 1, 2, and 3. So we got Qatar, then this bloody street circuit that doesn't even look like it's half finished yet, and then
Abu Dhabi.
They're gonna have to kill half the population to be able to get that that race on.
Yeah, it'll be that. Yeah. It'll be like that in Jurassic Park. You know, we've spared no expense. We've just spared no bodies. It's just throw more people at the problem.
So we were talking about this in the earphone group the other week, and it's just like we just cannot see how aside as slavery aside, how they're actually going to get this race to go, because there are just not enough people. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, sorry. There are enough people. No.
The last I saw, it looks like the majority of it looks like the majority of the track surface is basically finished, but there's no infrastructure. I think the pit lane's still yet to be built. I don't think there's much there beyond bare foundations at the moment for most of it. It's not looking promising. But then again, I mean, that Vietnam circuit got built in a stupid amount of time from absolutely nothing.
That's true.
So, I mean, we could be proven wrong.
Yeah.
Do you guys know if Qatar is a night race or not?
Might be a twilight race.
Yeah, I think I'll double check the hours because I can work it out from there. Just open Outlook.
Okay.
Yeah, so Qatar, no, that's Australia. That's definitely not happening. Yeah, so Qatar kicks off at 2 p.m. UK time, which is
that's what
that's going to be a twilight race because Abu Dhabi kicks off 1 p.m. UK time, and that usually becomes a twilight race.
Yeah. Okay. So the reason I ask is that Merc typically run better when it's not as stinking hot as we'd expect in like Mexico, that sort of thing. So
it is expected that Mercedes should go well there, but it's still at the moment fairly unknown.
Yeah, well, 2 of those 3 circuits we've never been to before. One's brand new and the other one's a bike circuit. So I mean,
Yeah, I think the Qatar circuit, and I mean this is something which will have to be left for the preview, which I may not be available for on Monday. I should start a new job on Monday. It's going to be interesting because I think the Red Bull type setup will go well in the sort of middle sectors, but then Merc are going to have that kind of shove down that long straight. So it could be interesting.
The thing with that Qatar circuit is it's all like all your corner exits are point and squirt. Like there's not a huge amount of like sort of
like sweeping corners or
change in radius or anything like that. It's just very much like in, apex, out, put your foot down. So
well, like you said, it's a bike circuit, isn't it? So
yeah, it is. Yeah, typically the bike racing there is pretty exciting, but I'm not sure it's a circuit that's well suited to cars. But we'll see. They've done GT racing there in the past, and that wasn't terrible. So we'll see.
Sorry about the lengthy startup. For some reason, YouTube wasn't letting me edit anything about the live stream, so I couldn't change the description or the thumbnail.
No.
And it's still not letting me do it, so I'm just going to do the live stream and do it all retrospectively.
No worries.
I think that's probably might be what I did, to be honest.
Bit of a pain.
Question about the Jeddah street circuit while we're chinwagging. It says it's a street circuit. Now Sochi says it's a street circuit. Now we have street circuits like Monaco where they are the entire place. Then we have places like Melbourne where they have the pit lane and everything, but they are where, unlike like Singapore, where we have some infrastructure that is semi-permanent, but then connects to main roads. Does anybody know offhand if Jeddah is going to link onto any, if it's going to be all public roads, or if some of it is going to be purpose-built, or if it's all going to be purpose-built?
The majority of it is public road when it's not a racetrack, from what I understand. So they had to resurface a lot of it because basically the surface wasn't up to snuff for car racing. So they ripped most of the circuit surface up, and they've relayed it with,
With like
better quality roading, basically.
Yeah.
I think there are a couple of sections where it is just like, just to give a bit of variations to corners and that sort of thing. It will just be like dedicated sections of circuit.
Yeah. I wonder if that's going to be like the sort of pit lane and kind of area.
Yeah. I think, let me pull up because I think there is a map.
We've started a quite good debate in the comments over the sprint, the race / qualifying debate.
Qualifying, not a race.
Yeah.
Oh, I've just had an advert for Qatar Airways.
I keep getting Visit Qatar stuff. It's just my nerves.
Yeah.
And just by me mentioning it, it's just gonna
That'll teach me for turning off ad block and trying to be nice. Oh, I just had another nice recommended thing. What the hell? So I don't know how to get some
that sounded interesting.
Recommended. Yeah, it's just I loaded up I opened up YouTube to find the live streams. I can have a look at the questions. Yeah. And these are, of course, these own back headphones.
Well, yeah. So having a look at it, where are we? So it's all along the waterfront through these little man-made. Well, I think they're man-made, like pool areas, basically around the waterfront. It's all public road. The only thing I can see that they're adding, going off this map.
Yeah.
So it's the pit lane. And I think they're redoing a couple of roundabouts just to make them actually drivable. And that's it. So it's all public road besides pit lane. And there's some access roads and that sort of thing being put in. So it's a street circuit properly.
Oh, nice. It's a proper street circuit, unlike Sochi.
Yeah, which is a car park, basically. But,
Yeah.
Right.
Also, sorry, Louis, we've been...
As I say, we should probably crack on with the show.
Sorry.
But we can get back to this in the post show. There's a lot of comments and stuff about it. So
yeah, cool. Happy days.
Cool. Right. So. Ready to go? You ready, guys?
Yep.
It may have been Valtteri Bottas who took pole for the Brazilian Grand Prix, but it was Lewis Hamilton who stole the show by charging through the field like a bull that had seen red. Welcome back to the 150th Grid Talk podcast. My name is Lou Edwards, and I'll be your host as we look back on the sprint race for the Sao Paulo Grand Prix, which is qualifying, but it's also a race because of the points awarded. Anyway, joining me today is Tom Downey from the Everything F1 podcast.
Good evening.
And Steve Jackson from the Formula Shakedown.
Good morning.
So, as I said, it was Valtteri Bottas who took what some may have thought would have been an unlikely pole today, Tom. He started on the soft tyres rather than the mediums, which looked favourable, but it ended up working out for him.
Yeah. Also, from here on in, I'm going to call Valtteri Bottas Senor Porridge. So, just FYI. Yeah, awesome start for Mr. Oatman today. The way that Mercedes just absolutely sent it off the line. He just launched into first past Verstappen, and he basically just sat out front and just controlled it really well. He held Max back because I said I think Max will be passing by about lap 20. I was expecting the tyres to die. I was expecting Bottas to drop off. But no, Bottas really held on. He really kept Max behind him. And I was really, really impressed.
Yeah, it was a mega effort because Max did get close, Steve. He was within DRS midway through the race. He then backed off and then just couldn't seem to close the gap again to get an overtake.
Yeah, because he got to well within a second with about 6 laps to go and he backed off again. And I thought he was just recharging and letting his tyres and brakes cool down, but he never really made steps back in towards him. And I do wonder whether Red Bull are being a wee bit cautious themselves now that we've got, 3 races to go after tomorrow. And they've just settled for, basically a guaranteed second place. The tricky thing with the sprint race format for me is that it's not particularly exciting to watch, but what it does give us a good indication of is what these cars will perform like with a bit more fuel in them, rather than a handful of laps worth for just qualifying. So based on what we've seen, I'm not sure Red Bull have the long-term pace to compete, and that's obviously going to put a bit of pressure on Max, and we've seen it in the past when Max has pressure on himself, he is prone to errors. I think that goes for every driver, but he's got a championship to win. They do have the momentum. They're, within sort of sniffing range of constructors, and he's got 20 points or so, maybe a wee bit more over Lewis. I'll have to double check, but yeah, it was interesting to see him just sort of get to within that second or thereabouts, and then just not get any further. And I do wonder if there is going to be a bit of not panic, but a bit of head scratching at Red Bull tonight to see how they can make this work strategy wise, because Mercedes have sort of swung things back in their favour after today's performance.
Yeah, but Tom, at the end of the day, it's 2 more points for Max Verstappen, furthering his advantage over Lewis Hamilton, and it's he's still got it all to do tomorrow. Let's face it, there's still 71 laps of actual racing, going on tomorrow. But there must be a bit of worry from Red Bull that they just couldn't seem to match. Well, they couldn't get past Bottas, and Hamilton's going to be a charge through the field tomorrow.
Yeah, if I was Red Bull, I'd be sitting there just a bit nervous about what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't think it's going to be quite as sort of cut and dry as we think, because I think the reason Bottas got ahead effectively was, yes, he had a super launch, like I said, as did Hamilton in the other Merc and Carlos Sainz for that matter. But he got enough of a good launch to get at least somewhat level with Max, and then by the time they arrived at turn 1, he effectively had the inside line. So it was almost like a case of chicken, and then Bottas was quick enough to go ahead anyway. So tomorrow, Red Bull will probably be focusing a bit more on getting a really good launch for Max, making sure that he's at least alongside Hamilton going into turn 2. They're going to need Perez to keep Hamilton at bay as much as they can tomorrow, because Hamilton is in with a good shot of a podium. But in terms of like Red Bull versus Mercedes tomorrow, I think we could argue it's advantage Mercedes, even with the sort of double blow for Hamilton this weekend. It is far from over. It is far from over. And if anybody even thinks of writing off Hamilton for this championship, rather fool them.
Yeah, we'll get on to Hamilton in not very long. But Steve, Tom touched on the sort of the role that Perez has got to play tomorrow. We've also got to mention the role that Bottas has got to play tomorrow. If he is able to get ahead of Max, it is going to be imperative that he keeps him behind and doesn't let Max disappear off into the distance.
Well, I think that'll be the sort of trick that Mercedes will want to play. Like if Valtteri can do what he did today, and that was a immensely powerful start that he had, then he's got the freedom to hold Max at bay. I'm not too sure what it's. I mean, it's 71 laps, as you say. It's an hour and a half. So there's a lot of potential for things to change, but I'm not 100% confident in Red Bull's ability to actually, directly fight with Mercedes. So they'll have to, adopt a strategy of their own to try and force their hand. But, Bottas was incredibly dominant today. So he's clearly got, some decent race pace with, sort of 1/3, maybe a wee bit over fuel load. So it's a good indication of where that car is going to be tomorrow when we get into the later stages of the race, especially. So once there's more fuel in that Mercedes, it may change things again. We've seen that the Mercedes has really good single lap pace, but once the fuel's in, things tend to level out a wee bit with Red Bull. It is technically a high altitude circuit, so Red Bull, that might give them some confidence, but it's nowhere near as up in the clouds as Mexico. So it is a wee bit more level, and historically we've seen Mercedes do quite well here, apart from 2019 when it all went a wee bit wrong for them. And Max won that year. So it's really hard to call, but I think Mercedes do have the initiative, and they will be leaning heavily on Bottas to basically just hold them up and give Lewis a chance to get within a sort of good undercut zone and just play games with strategy. I think that's the only thing they can lean on at the moment.
Yeah, you do mention 2019. I was going to bring it up with it being slightly more high altitude. Bottas's engine did go a bit bang in 2019, so that may influence Mercedes' strategy. But with Bottas on pole, they very much do have the front foot. Next, Tom, I want to talk about Carlos Sainz.
Yes, please.
Started on the soft tyre, like Bottas, got a mega start, even probably more of a mega start than Bottas did. Grabbed P3 off Sergio Perez and managed to hold him back despite Perez being on his back the entire qualifying race.
Yeah. Also, just a side, I just want to pick up on what you said about Bottas and strategy, and with his engine going bang. It's had so many new engines this year, it can't go bang tomorrow. There's no chance. But going back to Carlos Sainz, yeah, what a start, what a launch he had. I don't know if it's because he was driving a Ferrari clad with soft tires as opposed to mediums or what, but he absolutely flew off the start. He was up to second at one point, or was almost up to second. I can't remember if he actually made it past Hamilton and then past Verstappen, and if then Verstappen then passed him back. He did actually
get past it. He did.
Yeah, and then Max went back round, in which you'd kind of expect. But yeah, an absolutely scintillating performance from Sainz today. He really held off Perez. And I think we were all expecting the soft tyres to burn up. But Sainz, once again, underrated and I think underappreciated and not shown enough on the TV coverage. He really, really put in a shift today. And he's put that Ferrari in a good position for some good points tomorrow. He's picked up a constructor's point as well for Ferrari, which is a big leap in the fight for third, because that has swung Ferrari's way recently. He's doing all the right things. He's doing all the right moves. I was really impressed with him again today.
Yeah, it was a mega job by Sainz, and you rightly bring up the constructors' battle with McLaren. Steve, that's with Sainz. In P3, Leclerc in P7, Norris in P6, and Ricciardo in 11th. Again, it's like it's going to be another week where Ferrari are going to further increase their that gap to McLaren and strengthen their hold on P3 in the constructors.
Yeah, they're 14.5 points clear or thereabouts, I think now. That power unit upgrade has obviously worked. They took a wee bit of a hit. I think it was back in Sochi or thereabouts where they started to roll that out, and I think they gave it to Charlie first. But it works. It's a fast Ferrari again. Who would have thought we'd see that this year? It was they've come an extremely long way since 2019, and obviously I think 2020 they'd rather just move on from. They've done very well with the very limited scope of upgrades that they can actually introduce to these cars, and what's very much a sort of holding pattern year for everyone. I know that's just a cliche that's absolutely dead now, like everyone uses it. But like they have made significant progress with a car that was fundamentally flawed. It was based on their car from last year, which was just an absolute dog. We all saw how poorly that went. The only thing that Ferrari really needs to polish up on now, like they've got two fantastic drivers. They've clearly got a car that works in certain conditions. I don't think it's got the outright pace to compete on very fast circuits like Mexico and this Jeddah circuit's going to be interesting to see how they go. But at a slightly more balanced circuit like Sao Paulo, the car's very quick. The only thing they need to do now is actually sort their damn strategy out, because they still shoot themselves in the foot. They'll put themselves into these amazing qualifying or not qualifying or race positions, and then it all sort of falls apart. So they've got potential and capacity to take advantage of the fact that they've basically got the more potent McLaren driver sandwich between the two of them. And I mean, like, with all due respect to Ricciardo, he's obviously had a bit of a shaky season, and I don't think that's a reflection on the quality of his driving. I think that's just a reflection on it's a very different car to drive compared to what he's used to. So McLaren are sort of fighting this now with one hand tied behind their back, and Ferrari have now got that initiative. They're like I said, they're 14.5 points clear. So this could be the race that determines the outcome of that third place in constructors. So they need to make sure that they're actually in a position to take advantage of any early pit stops that McLaren decide to make to try and run them long on hards or something like that. It's tricky to call, but I think that Ferrari have now got this in the bag. They'd need to have a pretty dire couple of weekends for it to swing back in McLaren's favour.
Yeah, it's it's far from over, but just like the sort of the main championship, we still don't know what's going to happen. We'll move sort of quickly on to fourth place. Tom, Sergio Perez started third, lost out at the beginning of, I'm going to just say it, the race. Then just sat behind Sainz for the entire race, didn't really make any progress. He's going to have to step up tomorrow and try and get ahead of Sainz if he wants to help his teammate.
Yeah, it wasn't brilliant from Perez today, but I think Red Bull in general suffered from starting on the mediums when all those around them started on the softs, and I think that did cost them today. I think it did cost Perez, and whilst he could have definitely gone for a move to get past Sainz, I do wonder if, much like Verstappen, Red Bull is sort of thinking of the long game, and it's like, as much as it might be nice to see him try and send one up the inside or around the outside of Carlos Sainz, they're probably thinking, well, we'd rather have you start P4 than have you spin or have you crash and have you start P18 or start from the pit lane. Because he had an incident in the first sprint event in Silverstone where he spun and then he started the race from the back and then just had a generally torrid weekend. Red Bull had a torrid weekend that weekend regardless. And they're probably thinking of the longer game. They're thinking of the Constructors' Championship, and they're going to be thinking, we need you up there to help Max to hold off anybody who's behind you, try and hold off Hamilton. Bit of a role reversal from last week in Mexico. He's got a pretty tough job to do tomorrow, I'd say, because I'm talking about Hamilton in a moment. He's going to be charging through the field like he's sipped some Red Bull and mixed it with some of Bottas's porridge or something. But he's going to be, he's going to be on one. And Perez used to keep him at bay for as long as he can. So if Max can get past Bottas straight away, Max can sail off into the distance. Or if Max needs to get past Bottas, or even if someone else gets past Max, if something happens, Max is going to need Perez behind him, basically sort of creating a roadblock, if you like. But I think Interlagos, that's going to be difficult.
Yeah, as we've seen today, Interlagos is a track where overtaking is quite easy, and keeping someone at bay is a lot easier said than done, even with today's cars. But Steve, we'll move on to the driver of the day, if there was one. Lewis Hamilton. He was disqualified from yesterday's qualifying for reasons I imagine everybody knows by now. But it didn't stop him. He went from P20 to P5 in, was it how many laps? It was 24 laps.
24, yeah.
And we have, despite the fact he has a 5-place grid penalty tomorrow, which will put him in 10th, he's then got 71 laps to try and take the lead. Is it possible?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think we've seen the perfect demonstration of what happens when you back someone like Lewis Hamilton into a corner. The technical infringement side of things I think we'll come to that in post race, because I've got some thoughts around that. But that aside, 20th to 5th in 24 laps with no stop for tires, no sort of variation in strategy. It's literally just put your foot down and go for 24 laps. They feel these things a wee bit heavier than what they need to be able to just run them like at full chat for the whole sprint, not race. So he's been on it for the whole time, and it's paid off. I'm not a Lewis Hamilton supporter. He is honestly the best driver we've seen in the sport. There's no doubt about that. But I support other drivers. But what I saw today was just, to quote Kimmy, really, really incredible performance. And the thing that sort of surprised me as well, at no point did he look like he was on the ragged edge. That was a very controlled drive. It was very patient. Apart from that send up the inside of Lando Norris into T1, that was amazing. I think I left the live recording and rewound that and watched it about 3 times. It was just, I could not understand how he managed to go from that far back and stop the car in time to hold the actual inside line into T1 as well. He gave Lando no choice, and gave him plenty of room as well. Like it was just, I've got nothing bad to say about Lewis's drive today. It's very rare that I do. Like we've seen mistakes from him this year, and he's put his hand up and admitted to those. But if he's not absolutely chuffed with what he achieved today, I don't know what would make him happy, because that was just that's probably up there with drive of the year for me. In fact, that would be up there for drive of in the last decade. That would be right up there with Jenson Button in Canada in 2011 or whenever it was, when he stopped like 1,600 times. That was mega. I might actually, once we finish this, I might actually go back and watch the not sprint race again. It was that good.
Yeah, it was certainly the most amount of overtaking that was happening in this not race. But you told me you got to admire just how good Hamilton was. He was making it look easy. You're just driving on 0% AI on the F1 game. It just looked too easy for him.
Well, I'm sure most people listening will know that I am a big Max Verstappen fan, but I cannot commend Lewis Hamilton enough for that drive today. He was P14 by turn 1. Yes, okay, he had 2 Haas to overtake, but he'd already passed Mazepin and Schumacher before they'd even gone whoa and dropped the clutch. And then he was past the 2 Williams before they could even blink, and before Latifi was into 3rd gear. And then he was just hustling and bustling. And I did notice in the commentary they were saying, "Oh, he's coming up behind Tsunoda now that AlphaTauri's, not an easy car to pass." 2 laps later, and Hamilton's moved up, and then it was like, "Oh, he's coming up to Daniel Ricciardo." Bottas struggled all last week, and he's passed him. It was just like Steve said, if you want to back any driver into a corner, and you do it to Lewis Hamilton, expect good things, There is a reason that man is a 7-time world champion and has won the most races ever. And I'm not just going to say it's the car because it's not the car. He's done it in seasons when he's not had the best car, when he's had quite a bad car. 2009 springs to mind with that McLaren. He is a fantastic driver. That drive today in that race, because it was a race, it wasn't qualifying, it was a race, fight me. It was just amazing. I was sitting there and I was thinking, well, I can't say exactly what I was thinking because we'll get cancelled. But it was just breathtaking to see him move through the field. And dare I say, if that would have been Valtteri Bottas, he'd have got stuck at about P14, P13. But Hamilton just dominated his way through the field. And I think the reason we don't see that enough of him is because he has been in a Mercedes, which has been a very, very, very good car since 2014, as we all know. He hasn't had to do that very much, but he had to do it in the was it the sprint in Italy this year, or was it the main race last year? I think it was the main race last year when he had a penalty, to work his way back up through the fields in Monza. Yeah. Yes, it was because it was when Gasly won.
Last year.
Yeah, thank you. We don't see these things very often from him because he doesn't have to do it very often, but every time he does it, it blows my mind.
Bearing in mind as well, that's not a car that's designed to run in traffic.
That's a car that's designed to sit
in traffic as well. Yeah.
That's a car that's designed to sit at the front because Mercedes rightfully can expect to sit at the front because they have been so good since 2014.
Yeah, it was.
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, it was truly a great performance from Lewis Hamilton, and honestly, I think both Steve and Thomas said it. I'm also not a Lewis Hamilton fan. It's probably the only episode of an F1 podcast outside of the Netherlands where you'll hear this. But yeah, I think we're all completely in awe of what Lewis Hamilton was able to do today. We'll move on to P6, which was Lando Norris, who did, Steve, make an epic move of his own on Charles Leclerc. That little battle between those two was huge, not just for Lando gaining places in the sprint race, but also, as we were mentioning earlier, it puts him between both of the Ferraris. It doesn't allow them to just both sail into the distance in tomorrow's race.
Yeah, I mean, good. Yeah, good. Good sixth place result for the birthday boy on a not qualifying session. Sorry, a not race. I keep getting confused. See, this is the problem. Anyway, yeah, that wee tussle we had with Charles was really good. And the thing I liked about it is they gave each other plenty of space, but they were still very, very aggressive towards each other. And I think that's something that a lot of people forget when they're talking about a certain other driver, that he's very aggressive, but he that you can be aggressive and clean at the same time. I mean, Fernando Alonso is also another very, a very good example of that. He's super rapid and uncompromising, but he typically doesn't punt people out of the way, or, I mean, he has recently, but we'll gloss over that. But with this battle between McLaren and Ferrari, I mean, I'm sort of surprising myself by saying this. He has probably got the less threatening Ferrari driver behind him. I think Carlos is the bigger threat at this stage of the season. He's just, I don't know what's happened to him. He's, had extra spicy meatballs added to his breakfast or something. It's just, he's incredibly rapid. So I think if Lando's able to keep Charles behind him, which is likely. I mean, we Lando definitely had the initiative with the race today, and sort of put Charles in his place. If he can clear Charles and gap him a wee bit and not give them the opportunity to undercut, then that's probably the best they can hope for. I mean, his teammates down in 11th, and unless there's some sort of early race incident, which we get a safety car or anything like that, I don't see Daniel making steps early on. He's typically sort of been more of a late race player. So yeah, I mean, good result for Lando. I don't think it's as good as it could be, considering just how quick that car has been, for most of the season. But Ferrari have just made steps in the last few rounds, which I don't think McLaren quite expected. And considering we're going into a brand new set of regulations next year with these new cars, it's very likely that McLaren pulled the pin on this year's car a handful of races ago, and they've just been drip feeding minor updates. Whereas I think Ferrari are obviously still very invested in trying to nail that third place with, hence the new power units. And it's good testing for them for next year as well. And those power units are going to be around until, 2026, I think it is now. So they're obviously investing in something a wee bit longer term, whereas McLaren might be sort of switching their focus, or they may have switched their focus to next year, by sort of mid-season, which isn't surprising at all.
Yeah, especially with how much change there is coming next year, it's not the most unwise move. Also, fourth place means they'd have more wind tunnel time than Ferrari due to the new rulings that come in. So it may be a benefit. We're not obviously saying that McLaren aren't doing that, by the way. But P7 for Charles Leclerc, Tom. It's not the worst position he can be in. It's within the points. He's got Daniel Ricciardo down in 11th. Realistically, he can push on from here, get solid points, and call itself, a good weekend.
He could do. I got to be honest. With all the sort of hype in front of him with Hamilton coming through, I kind of miss what happened to Charles Leclerc this weekend. Oh, I say this weekend, today. I did see him having a bit of a scrap with some of the McLaren at some point. He's in a good position for tomorrow. You refer to him as the more threatening Ferrari driver, which I think is fair because Carlos does come across as uber nice and perhaps not quite as aggressive on track. And we've certainly seen Leclerc be quite aggressive on track before, which is no bad thing, by the way. I mean, I don't know, don't know what's added an awful lot because he was sort of fairly anonymous today, surrounded by what was going on around him. That is, but if he gets a good launch tomorrow, could get past McLaren, could be sort of nipping on the heels of fifth. Might cause a bit of an issue for Hamilton tomorrow. He's. I think he's going to be. I think he and his teammates are going to be playing the team game tomorrow. I think they're going to be thinking more about the constructors more than anything. So I think they'll probably go for a slightly solid race as opposed to something uber spectacular, unless something out the blue happens.
Yeah, I think it's quite obvious that the goal of Ferrari is to get through P3, and keeping both cars in the points is the best way to do that. Someone who had, I guess you could call maybe a slightly disappointing sprint race, Pierre Gasly, qualified amazingly yesterday. He was P5, I believe, and then got bumped up to P4 after Hamilton's disqualification. But could only manage P8 today, and for much of it, he was being hounded by the Alpine of Esteban Ocon. I don't know what you really can say. It may only be the sprint race, but it doesn't look good for AlphaTauri, especially when they're fighting with Alpine for fifth place in the constructors.
Yeah, they are now level on points too, 106 each. So, that's all still very much up in the air. I mean, most of that sort of top six in the way of constructors is very hard to determine at the moment. But with Pierre, we didn't really see too much of him. I think he just got a less than ideal start and spent most of his time, as you said, defending from Esteban Ocon. So I didn't really have the capacity to start hunting down Charles. He finished around 11 seconds down the road behind the Ferrari as well. So I don't think he would have been much of a threat, even if Ocon was further behind him. Ocon finished less than half a second behind him too, so I think another lap or two and he would have had him too. So it's it's a bit of a tricky one, this, because Yuki Tsunoda is becoming good, but he's still got a lot of work to do. So again, it's a bit like what McLaren are experiencing with their driver pairing. It's, Pierre is doing most of the heavy lifting, and Yuki's obviously nailed some, bagged some points for them as well, and nailed some really good drives. But for the majority of the season, Pierre's been doing all this heavy lifting, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's a bit of late season fatigue. I mean, we're at the end of another, we're in the midst of another triple header at the moment as well, and a lot of these guys are up until stupid o'clock on Friday morning trying to get their cars built that didn't arrive until Thursday afternoon, which is, it's been a bit of a weird weekend for a lot of teams, and something that a lot of people don't necessarily see is that the drivers are still very much involved with the behind the scenes activities of the teams as well. They've got, besides the media duties, they actually do get quite involved with the setup discussions, the strategy planning, that sort of thing, because they are the bum in the seat at the end of the day that has to drive the car. So we are seeing some strange fluctuations and some late charges from certain drivers, and the Alpine has been a bit of a strange car in which it's always hard to call how it's going to go. But AlphaTauri, I mean, they've been relatively consistent, but this isn't the sort of result they're wanting. I think the only thing they can hope for is that, if Pierre can stay with Charles and he starts tripping over Lando, and he can take advantage of them squabbling and maybe jump back up into fifth, sixth position, that'd be good. But I can't really see them progressing beyond there. It doesn't look like it's been a particularly stellar weekend for them so far, besides that qualifying performance.
Yeah, I guess tomorrow's a long race. We'll just have to wait and see. But for Esteban Ocon, Tom, this is quite encouraging. He's in the top 10. He's right behind, a car which he needs to be beating. It's clear that the Alpine does have better pace than what we've been seeing, especially over the last few weekends. This could be good for Alpine. This could actually tend to be a really positive weekend. Yeah,
Ocon's in a really good place for tomorrow. How does it work with tyre allocations this weekend?
Fresh tyres with
it is just fresh tyres, free choice for all, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely. So I hadn't even thought of that until I started speaking, hence the slow down. So Ocon, I wonder how many people will start on softs compared to mediums tomorrow. He could, if I'm going to sound a bit like a broken record, if he gets a good launch, if he can get himself ahead of the AlphaTauri early on, and if then Fernando sort of has a decent start behind him, Alpine could really be game on for getting a jump on AlphaTauri in the standings, which at one point I wasn't entirely sure would happen. But as for Ocon himself, he did a decent job today. He's in a very good position for tomorrow. I think P10 is probably roughly where you could expect that that Renault to be. And now I'm wondering if that Renault power unit is not as strong compared to the Ferrari unit. I know I was saying earlier in the season that I thought the Ferrari unit was the worst. Now I'm leaning towards that Renault Sport unit being the worst. But also we don't have any other teams to compare it with, because obviously Renault don't have any customer teams. And we all know who the Ferrari customer teams are, so it's not apples to apples. So hopefully Ocon can get a decent launch. If he's starting on I think he's starting on the left-hand side of the grid as well. So because if he's P10, it's even numbers.
P9, so he'll be.
Oh, he's P9, is he? Sorry.
He'll go up a place because of Hamilton's penalty. So
of course, because Hamilton's penalty. Okay, right, yeah. So
he'll be P8.
Okay, all right, okay. So he is starting on the inside, just to space out from what I thought. So I confused myself then. But I apologise to our listeners. But so if he does get a good launch, he'll have the inside line going into 2 and 1, much like Bottas did today. So Yeah, he could be in a very good position for tomorrow. I'm quite looking forward to that.
Yeah, he definitely does need to take advantage of it, and of course he'll be looking in his mirrors for Max Verstappen tomorrow if Mercedes' strategy does go a bit awry. But rounding up the top 10 for the sprint today was Sebastian Vettel in the Aston Martin. He's not had a bad weekend so far. He was ahead of Stroll in the qualifying. He's again ahead of Stroll here, and not looking in the worst of shape.
Yeah, pretty good performance considering just how up and down that car is. Seb's, most of his race was just being stuck in the middle of that DRS train with Gasly and Ocon and Ricciardo, and I think there was Alonso there or thereabouts as well. So we've seen it a million times with these DRS freight trains. It becomes a bit of a procession, and any sort of passing is entirely opportunistic or based on somebody ahead of you having a mistake. Considering Lance hasn't really looked all that threatening all weekend. I mean, if Seb's able to keep within the top 10, then it's a good result for Aston Martin. They're in a bit of a no man's land in terms of constructors. I think they've got about 68 points. So they've got AlphaTauri ahead of them on 106 or whatever it is, and Williams behind them on 23. So I think they're probably very aware of the fact that that's seventh is what they can expect unless something drastic happens, which we've seen plenty of first this year with Formula One, but that would be a bit of a stretch, I think, even for my imagination. But yeah, pretty good result. He qualified 11th, so gained a place. I think that was just in the early melee before that DRS train developed. But the car doesn't look slow. And Seb is, he's wily, he's fighty, he enjoys a bit of actual wheel-to-wheel driving too. So there's opportunities there. The Alpine is, they've had plenty of on-track squabbles before, so it can compete with those cars in that mid-pack quite comfortably. I think Aston Martin's major issue, I'm again going to sound like a stuck record because I think this is about the millionth time I've said this, they're still paying a bit of a price for developing a car based on another car, and they may not necessarily have a intimate understanding of how it works in various conditions and at various circuits. So they've effectively got themselves to blame, but they have done all they can to try and correct the trajectory they were on at the start of the year when it was looking quite grim. So fair play. Seb's obviously enjoying himself. It's nice seeing Seb just sort of comfortable with his driving and just where he is in terms of his career. If he can keep his head screwed on, stay out of trouble, we could expect a top 10 result for Seb tomorrow. I don't think we could say the same for Lance, though. He's looking a wee bit further away.
Yeah, Lance did have a very disappointing qualifying, in which himself was incredibly angry about. But P11, Tom, Daniel Ricciardo, he did a fairly all right job in qualifying yesterday. However, got a really poor start, dropped like an absolute stone, and as Stephen mentioned, got caught up in that DRS train and had no hope of really getting forward.
Yeah, it was more a sort of Danny Rick-esque performance of pre-summer break. Sadly, he just couldn't really sort of break that DRS train that you mentioned. He was just effectively stuck. Like you said, didn't get off the line very well. Got passed by a few cars around him, and then just got stuck. Couldn't move. Couldn't really do anything. I don't think it's giving him a particularly good omen for tomorrow. And from memory, has he ever been on the podium in Brazil before? Not that I'm thinking he will, but I'm just trying to think of how well he's gone here in the past. I don't remember him doing spectacular things in the past in Brazil anyway. He might have had like a couple of P5s or something. I may be wrong, but yeah, I don't foresee him doing a particularly good job tomorrow, sadly, which is a shame because he did do the initial qualifying yesterday. He finished that in a decent position. But yeah, sadly, slipped back, not made it easy for himself tomorrow. And he's got Lewis Hamilton just ahead of him as well. So, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him either, maybe slip down a bit further, because realistically, Hamilton's probably going to get a decent launch in front of him, which then might sort of give whoever's P12 sort of like a bit of a gap or something. Danny Rick might just be might be a grim day at the office, and certainly not do McLaren any favours in the constructors.
Yeah, certainly. And behind him, Steve, he's got Fernando Alonso. We're used to seeing Fernando get some rocket starts in these sprint races. However, it wasn't to be today. He was right on the back of that DRS train. Was lucky to have actually make it to the end, considering the what the two Alfa Romeos decided to do right in front of him. But it's a place where he can push on. He's not too far outside the top 10. So if anything is to happen in front, there is opportunity.
Yeah, 9th to 12th with nothing really to show for it in between isn't a particularly good result. I don't think that's Fernando's fault necessarily. I mean, it's again, he's sort of fallen victim to the DRS train, which he was at the very tail end of. So he's sort of it's probably the worst position you can be in. And he had, he had a bit of a gap to Gio behind him as well. I think around 5 seconds, 5.5 seconds, or something around there. But yeah, not a particularly good result. I mean, but somebody pointed out on Twitter before we started this that he he finished P1 in free practice 2, and he did. He was about 3.5 seconds off his qualifying time. So just goes to show how pointless and unrepresentative those P2 practice 2 sessions are in a weekends with the sprint qualifying format. But it's. I think Ocon started to show that he is, he's obviously younger, which is, if you ask a professional racing driver if age slows you down, they'll say no. But I mean, that there is evidence that is absolutely correct. But Ocon's been performing pretty well lately, and he's sort of showing Fernando up a wee bit. So I mean, Alonso's got a seat for next year, so he doesn't need to try too hard to prove himself. He's a 2-time world champion, for God's sakes. I mean, he's good, but not the sort of performance that they'll want. The only thing that he can probably hope for is getting stuck into the back of a group of cars that may start tripping over themselves. And Fernando's probably the worst person to have behind you when it comes to defending from another driver. So Sao Paulo's a good track to affords a lot of opportunities to pass. The Alpine's not a terrible car. It's just not. It's not fantastic. It's sort of very middle of the road. But he's in a middle of the road sort of position. So we'll see. Always hard to tell with Fernando. I think we'll just wait and see what happens. But yeah, today wasn't a particularly good indication of their longer run pace.
Giovinazzi was P13. He was got a bit of an incident with his teammate Kimi Räikkönen, had a bit of a coming together, and Kimi was sent in a bit of spin, which is the last thing you really want to be doing when your seat's on the line, isn't it?
Yeah, he did have a bit of a set too with Kimi, but also it was nice to see Gio sticking his nose in and effectively fighting for a position, and he's fighting for a seat is what it boils down to. I thought we'd have had this sort of done and dusted by now, so he knows either way if he's coming and going. I mean, he might already know, we don't know, but this uncertainty hanging over him is certainly not going to help. I was impressed with Gio today, and I think Kimi should have maybe taken a bit more care when he was turning in, because he should have, especially in a sprint event like this today, you should almost expect someone to be there, and Gio had every right to be there. So I don't think it was Gio's fault that Kimi got punted off, if you ask me. I think it was a racing incident, if you can have a racing incident in qualifying, because it wasn't a race. Still not over that.
Qualifying incident.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. But it's but yeah, it was solid from Gio. He had a good qualifying anyway on Friday, and then the sprint quali race doodah showdown, if you like, today was really good from Gio. I thought he did really well, because that car's not the best, and he took us to places where it arguably doesn't deserve to be.
Yeah, with all this sort of like quali racing, I was kind of wondering, the fact that Sergio Perez can get past Sainz, I wonder if that's a illegal blocking from some Sainz. It's usually you have to get out of the way during qualifying. But anyway, P14 for Lance Stroll, Steve, really not great. He didn't have a great qualifying yesterday. He hasn't had a great sprint race today. Really showing that Aston Martin is far from an easy car to get to grips with.
Yeah, and he's Lance has come good this year, I think. I mean, he's still got some work to do, and he's not been in F1 for overly long, but he's been around long enough, I think, for us to make conclusions about the sort of level of driver he is. He is, in my opinion, a good midfield driver, but he's driving a car which is just uncooperative for a good portion of or has been uncooperative, I should say, for a good portion of the year. He's had Seb's number for a good few races this year, but I'm just trying to think if he's ever had much success at Sao Paulo, and I don't think it's a circuit that he overly enjoys. But yeah, that qualifying effort was not great. He did finish one place ahead of where he qualified, though, so he qualified 15th. Well, actually, no, technically he would have qualified 14th after Lewis got his penalty, so he's basically stayed put. So he finished 14th. He had Yuki Tsunoda a couple of seconds behind him. He wasn't that far off the back of Giovinazzi either, but I don't think he was in a position to threaten him. And Yuki, I don't think was sort of in a position to start closing in on him either. So pretty lonely race for Lance, which is a shame because for the grief he gets, and I'll put my hand up and say that I've given him a bit of crap in the past. He's a capable driver, and he's done some pretty impressive. He's put in some pretty impressive performances this year. He probably won't be including today on that list. So see what happens tomorrow. But yeah, that Aston Martin's a bit sort of just unpredictable. If a driver like Seb can't consistently place that car, then there's probably something wrong with the car.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're saying Yuki Tsunoda wasn't going to be much of a threat. Well, it looked like Nicholas Latifi. He could have been a bit of a threat to Yuki Tsunoda. He finished less than a second behind him. But again, not the greatest performance we've ever seen from Yuki, and another one that he's going to be wishing that the race goes a lot better tomorrow.
Yeah. Where did he actually qualify in quali? Was he P12? I think he wasn't he? He went out in Q2, which is an improvement.
Tsunoda was 12th.
Yeah, which is an improvement on P16, but it's not. If AlphaTauri are going to secure fifth over Alpine, it's not good enough. I do feel like Tsunoda is getting a bit more consistent, and he's not perhaps getting quite as swearing, as hot-headed on the radio, which is maybe helping him a bit. But in terms of in terms of today, yeah, he just went backwards. I wouldn't have expected that car to be passed by the Aston Martin. I know the Aston is a decent car, like you said, Steve. I do agree with you, but Yuki just didn't have a good day at the office. Got passed by Hamilton, but you'd expect that. You'd expect Hamilton to pass that sort of gaggle of 6-7 cars, which he did without even blinking. But Tsunoda, you'd like to have seen him put up at least some form of defence against Hamilton. And yeah, he just not a brilliant day at the office. He's probably ready for the off season. To be fair, just have a bit of time. I think he needs more, not protection, but he needs a bit more, perhaps a bit more support from Red Bull in the sense of it feels like he's sort of being left to try and figure it out on his own. We don't hear an awful lot about him in the news. If you look at the likes of like Lando Norris and all the rest of it, you see a lot of support for them from their teams, publicly. Now, yeah, Red Bull could be doing it behind the scenes, but if it's being seen to do in public, that will change the public perception of him, and that will help his confidence, and that will help his, he might have like anxiety or something for all I know, especially with people perhaps slating him, and you can hear how frustrated he gets on the radio, which I understand because, again, we all know how high pressure that Red Bull junior program is. We've seen it take its toll on the likes of Gasly and people like Sebastian Vettel and all the rest of it in the past. So maybe a bit of public support from Red Bull wouldn't go amiss. If Helmut could stop being a Sith Lord for a day and maybe look after some of his junior drivers, that might certainly help. As for the actual race, I've gone on a bit of a tangent there. As for the actual race tomorrow, he needs to get past. I'd say he needs to get past Lance Stroll, or Lance Stroll and Tsunoda need to get past Giovinazzi, but Giovinazzi also needs to stay ahead of them. And then you've got the likes of Alonso and Ricciardo. Realistically, Hamilton's going to be further up the grid. Let's be real. So Seb will probably be dropping back a bit. And he then needs to be sort of trying to mix it into the points, sort of into that sort of like P10, P9 kind of area if he really wants to make an impact.
Yeah, just to add to what you said there as well very quickly, Tom, it doesn't help when the team principal of the team you're ultimately aiming to get into uses you as an excuse for a poor qualifying result. But that's not going to do him any favours. And I'm a Red Bull fan. That was bang out of order.
Yeah, I was about to bring that up. It was like, it may help if Christian Horner once in a while came out and said, the nice thing rather than blaming him for the qualifying error, which at the end of the day was not his fault at all. Well, in my personal opinion, it happens. It's not anything to shout about.
No, absolutely.
So Steve, we'll move on to the two Williams because they were 16th and 17th. Latifi ahead of Russell for 2 days in a row now. It's probably a record.
Yeah, shock horror.
Yeah, no, George must be having one of his off days because Mr. Saturday, he didn't really turn up and he didn't really have much opportunity to turn up today. But...
No, Mr. Saturday has not had a Saturday to remember at all. Yeah, weird to see Nick actually get him twice on a weekend. Like you'd expect, you'd expect at least one of the two to swing back in George's favour, but neither Williams has looked particularly, particularly quick. Just having a quick look at the session times. I mean, they've sort of floated around the tail end of the grid. I mean, I won't go over FP2 because it's just absolutely irrelevant in my opinion. But I mean, they were 17th and 18th in free practice one. Latifi was ahead of Russell in that session as well by not much at all, less than a second. Less than a tenth of a second, I should say. But yeah, it's been advantage Nick for most of the weekends. I mean, qualified his teammate by where are we? By half a tenth. Yeah, it's been very much next weekend, but I don't think there's much to write home about for the team as a whole because they've just sort of floundered around the back. I'd expect the same sort of thing tomorrow. They could probably argue with one of the Alfa Romeos, if not both, if they drop back like they typically do. And I mean, I don't think Haas so much of a threat, but yeah, I think it'll be quite a lonely race for Williams tomorrow. They'll probably have a bit of fun with each other, but I imagine George, even though he said he's not thinking about Mercedes, come on, he's thinking about Mercedes. He's probably investing quite a bit of prep into next year, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. He's obviously wanting to make a career out of what he's doing, and he's got the best opportunity by going into what is arguably the best team. So yeah, I mean, fair play to him if he's just cooling things off and just doing what he needs to do to see the season out. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing at all. As for Latifi, I mean, he's effectively adopting that team leader role with Williams next year. I mean, a lot of Albon's going in. Albon's obviously driven for arguably the other best team on the grid, but I think Nick he'll be a good sort of team leader. He's got a very mature head on his shoulders now. He's again, same as Lance, I used to give him a bit of grief, but he's come good. So I don't really have anything bad to say about him. I don't think he's a future world champion, but I do expect, if Williams can perform in the future, I would expect him to fight for, top fives, maybe the odd podium. But, as for this weekend, not looking down the road. Probably a bit of a miserable, lonely weekend for Williams. And I imagine they'll be doing what a lot of the other teams will be doing now, which is, full steam ahead for 2022.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as I imagine most of our listeners will be aware, Williams actually won't be partaking in the end of the season test. So focusing on 2022 is going to be a huge priority for them if they are to still be fairly competitive or move up the grid. Anyway, so P18, Kimi Räikkönen went for a spin, as I think, but Tom, he still managed to finish ahead of both Haas's, Schumacher in 19th and Mazepin, obviously, in 20th, finishing just over a minute, almost being lapped. It was probably not actually too far off, considering he was 67 seconds off the lead, and it takes about a minute 13, sort of on average to get round. So probably wasn't too far off, but that's.
Did we just give Kimi credit for finishing ahead of both Haas cars,
despite spinning? Yeah, I think we have to give him a look.
That's like giving someone credit for breathing. It's well done. You've done something that was almost impossible to not do. Kimi, he's mentally checked out. He knows he's probably not going to get any points. Mexico was a nice surprise for him, but realistically, is he going to get anything else this season? No. Is he going to get anything this weekend? No. Is he going to get lapped? Yeah. It's just, he's just, he said it himself, it's a hobby. Quite an expensive hobby, quite a nice hobby to have. But, he's not fighting for anything. Alfa Romeo aren't going to overtake Williams in the championship. And unless there is some divine intervention, they're not going to get overtaken by Haas on points. Unless there is a glitch in the matrix, they're going to stay where they are. They're going to stay ninth. They are ninth, aren't they? I believe so. Put my foot in it. They're going to stay ninth. They're not going to move up. They're not going to move down. They might get a point, which would be nice if it happens, but he's not going to be fighting for anything of any significance. Yeah. Kimi, right? The way he was driving today, it was like someone who was just like, "Oh, cool! I'm going to go drive around Brazil in my company car. Check out the sights, go drive past the lake." I'm surprised he didn't set up a chair like Alonso did a few years ago and go fishing or something, because he was just sort of like dawdling round. Bit of a clumsy move on Giovinazzi, I'd say. He'd rather squeeze Alonso, who backed out, didn't see that Gio was there, and it's the cardinal rule in F1: you don't crash into your teammate. Just ask Hamilton, and it's just everything about his demeanor, about the way he is on the radio. I know he's a man of few words, opposite of me, and he is. I think he's just like beyond ready to call it a day. He's probably just looking forward to Abu Dhabi when he can finish that race if he doesn't retire, and then in true Kimi style, he's just going to have all the drink.
I'm sure he's absolutely looking forward to it. Steve, finish off the sprint race by talking about the two Haas's. I mean, what can you say? We're so many races into the season. I feel like we're probably repeating ourselves with every race that's going on. But Haas, where you'd expect them to be, at the very back, not competitive at all, and finishing. Well, Mick Schumacher finished 11 seconds behind a spinning Kimi Räikkönen.
Yeah. I mean, I think I've figured it out, actually. I think I've figured out why they're so slow. They don't have money to afford Ferrari power units. So what they've got in the back of each Haas under the engine cover is 3 of their mechanics with a loudspeaker making engine noises with a hole cut out in the floor for their feet. It's just... this is right down there in terms of embarrassing displays with MasterCard Lola. And if you're listening and you're not old enough to remember that, or you're just not familiar with it, MasterCard Lola lasted precisely 1 race at Melbourne in 1997, I think it was. They failed to qualify because we had the 107% rule back then, and they didn't make the cut by any sort of margin. And then they shipped all their gear to Brazil, where it remains today, because they never raced again. And in fact, some of the team equipment is actually still in storage at a site not far away from the circuit itself. So if you're in Brazil and you know where it is, please try and find me a nose cone or something so I can put it up on my wall as an ornament. Anyway, Haas, yeah, just they'll finish about where they are at the moment. One thing I did want to address is obviously Mazepin was quite upset at the end of I think it was Q1 on Friday. It's very easy to throw rocks at Mazepin, and for the vast majority of it, I wouldn't say he deserves it, but he can expect it for the sort of character that he is. He hasn't really shown himself to be a decent person at all. I stand by that. However, that was an effort that he put in that obviously meant a lot to him. Whether that was his mistake or not, I will let you decide. But there was some pretty unfortunate comments directed his way that I saw yesterday. I don't think those were entirely necessary. He was obviously very upset after what he thought was a very good performance. Again, whether you agree with that or not, I beg to differ. But yeah, and with that in mind, I think some of the rock throwing is unnecessary, and that was. If you want to, question his character, I would actually use the stuff that he's done, which is far less savoury as ammunition, because he's a public figure. He is a Formula One driver. I personally don't think he belongs there, and drivers do need to be held accountable for their actions. But making fun of a driver for being clearly upset over something like that, I'm not sure is the right thing to do. He's we've got sort of plenty of evidence of his character and with many other ways. So bit of a weird weekend for Mazepin. I think it's very likely that the lack of pace out of that car is starting to get under his skin, and regardless of who he is, I can't blame him. If I drove a car that was that far off the pace, I'd probably be quite, pissed off as well. Mick has obviously retained his composure a lot more this season, but I can't imagine either of those guys are having a huge amount of fun. This is do or die now for Haas. If that car doesn't improve or isn't capable of moving up the grid at all next year, then I think we can see that. I wouldn't be surprised if that team packed their bags midway through. Because if they're getting performances like this next year in the first few races, then Gene Haas will either pull the pin altogether or he'll sell it off to Mazepin's dad, and that'll become Mazepin F1 or whatever they're going to call it. So, yeah, it's looking very, very dire. They've been no threat to anyone for the entire season. Yeah, really, really sad to see a grid slot or 2 grid slots taken up by a car that's just has no right to be there. Yeah.
Yeah. What you said about the sort of the drivers being frustrated about being so far at the back, I can imagine for any sportsman, because they're there to win. Like every driver's there, they're not there to take part. They're there to win, and they want to win. And having Mick has just come off an F2 World Championship, and now really at the back, and then Nikita Mazepin also not only being in a very slow car, but then also really not having even the pace to match his teammate on any weekend. He's failed to beat Mick in any session, bar there being some sort of abnormal incident like a crash or something. He's
Monaco, for example.
Yeah, exactly. He's actually, I think they said in the free practice too on the commentary that he's actually been last in every session, bar an anomaly, sort of as a crash or a failure or something that's happened. And that is
the thing that's concerning with this as well is like you make a really good point. Like, we've got the F2 world champion in a car that would probably struggle to keep up with an F2 car at some circuits. It's that slow. And it's just not a good look. Like, the idea with these, smaller teams is to not the idea, but the common outcome is that they will bring in new talent from F2 or wherever they've come from to start making roads in Formula One. And that's just that. So Haas is basically a revolving door of misery and just non-performance. Like, people gave Grosjean crap and Magnussen crap, and look at what they're doing in IMSA and IndyCar and that sort of thing. They are phenomenal drivers. They just did not have the tools to actually show how good they were, and they got frustrated. They started making mistakes. They start tripping each other up. It all turns to custard, and everyone laughs at them as they leave. It's just like these are not the sort of cars you want to see in Formula One, and it's not the sort of performance you'd expect for a Formula One car. It's got to be embarrassing for Formula One and for Liberty Media and that sort of thing to have a mean team. We've had teams where that perform poorly, but there've always been one or two other teams that would give them the opportunity to fight and actually give those drivers in those cars an opportunity to show their actual wheel skills. But neither of those two have had the opportunity to do that. And whilst I maintain that one of them may not necessarily deserve to be in Formula One, how can you possibly prove anyone wrong with a car like that?
Yeah, it does make things incredibly difficult. And they can only hope that Haas' decision not to develop this car at all throughout this season, bar any sort of late upgrades from the 2020 season, is going to pay off. Because if it doesn't, then it's a huge error on the part of Haas if they're not able to even look remotely competitive next season.
Louis, I just want to jump in on what Steve said there. I appreciate that we're going to be going over all ground, and I'm conscious I don't want to take up too much more time with this. But I just want to echo everything Steve said, specifically about Mazepin. Yes, in the past we've talked about the reasons he's in F1 and perhaps not being quite as deserving of a seat as some of the drivers. I'm trying to be as sort of impartial on this as possible. Regardless of your feelings of if he should be in F1 or if he should not be in F1, he is in F1, okay? And no amount of saying we say no to Mazepin signing petitions on change.org or anything is going to change that. He is staying in this team. He is staying here next year. His dad has a significant financial involvement in the team, and that's not changing. I don't agree with it, but it is what it is. And like Steve said, the car that they've got is woeful. Steve, you said about some other teams in the past where they've been dying at the back of the group. They've had other teams around them fighting. So the 2010 to 2012 springs to mind with the likes of HRT and Virgin Racing sort of being around. That kind of year is what springs to mind. Look at some of the drivers we had there. Daniel Ricciardo started the season midway through in that HRT team. Look at how well he turned out. And another point that we raised was about this year. Those two drivers cannot show their ability, and that is absolutely true. And for them, it must be absolutely soul destroying to know that they're getting into a car which is they know they're going to be laps 2, maybe 3 times in a race, maybe even 4 times if it's that bad, which could maybe even happen this weekend, because Brazil is quite a short lap and quite a quick lap. Just give them a break. I know Mazepin doesn't have a squeaky clean history, right? We all know what happened with him in the off-season last year. And I'm not saying it's okay. Nobody is. But seeing how genuinely upset he was at the end of Q1, that was him opening up. That was him showing that he does have an emotional side and that he is trying. He does care what he's doing. Let's just give him a bit of a break. He's not, we know, really, he's not going to be world champion. We know that. He'll do a couple of seasons and then he'll probably be off once money moves elsewhere or what have you. But whilst he's here, give him a bit of support. He's racing against Michael Schumacher's son, who is going to be taking all the limelight, and that's painting him out to be a worse person and a worse driver than I think he actually is. Yes, I have spoken about how some of his on-track actions leave me sort of almost worried, and I do still stand by that. But he was on for a good lap in Q1 yesterday, and I would go as far as to say he was beginning to outdrive that car's capabilities because the car gave up on him effectively. That's what happened. Now, that's certainly what it looked like to me. Again, I'm no professional. But just lay off the guy a bit. Let him do his thing on track. And just ease off. Just give him a bit of support. And hopefully the Haas car can be a bit better next year. If it doesn't, they'll either be swallowed up by Ferrari and turned into a full sort of development team, a bit like AlphaTauri, or they're going to become Russian-sponsored or a Russian state team. And Russian state athletes haven't had the best history in the past. We only need to look at the doping from the Olympics. But just he's here and he's trying to do a job. Imagine if you were that person jumping into a car, because the step from an F2 to an F1 car is a huge step. They are such a different beast. They're so much heavier. They take so much more critical thinking whilst you're driving. It's not just like altering brake balance. It's altering the hybrid settings. It's altering the energy recovery. It's also altering kinetic settings. And he's got people like Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen coming up behind him. And whilst he's trying to get to grips with what he's doing, he's also got to be thinking, okay, I've got someone who's fighting for a world championship coming up screaming behind me, and I need to find a place to get out of the way. It's not easy. And let's just give him a bit of support.
Yeah, honestly, I echo what you've both said, and I think in terms, these days where we talk about, well, mental health is such a more openly discussed topic. You got to understand that these drivers are human beings at the end of the day, and it takes an incredible amount of mental toughness to even be able to compete on a level like Formula One. Never mind, have it when you've got the entire world on your back. But we'll now move away from the sprint race and look towards tomorrow's actual race. So we'll start with the podium predictions for tomorrow's race. Steve, do you want to kick us off? Who's going to be on the podium for you tomorrow?
I have a terrible feeling that Bottas and Max might come together. If they don't, I'm not sure Carlos has got the overall race pace to stay there, and that's not his fault. That's the car. I'm going to say Bottas, Max, Lewis, third, I reckon. I reckon it's possible. After what we saw today, he could finish a minute up the road in first place tomorrow. I don't know, but I'm going to be conservative and say Valtteri, Max, Lewis in that order.
Okay. Tom?
Maybe it's the Max Verstappen fan in me, but I think Max is going to learn from what happened today. I think he's going to get into P1. He's going to sail off. And I think Hamilton is going to... I'm going to be boring. I think Hamilton is going to size through the field. I think he's going to get past Perez with DRS down the main straight. And I think Mercedes are then going to switch positions. And I think we'll have Verstappen, Hamilton, and then Bottas on the podium.
We're all going with a similar theme. We're all going Hambot there, but I'm gonna do it different. The only other choice for a top three, I'm actually going to have. I reckon Mercedes' strategy tends to be flawless. They've had their hiccups now and again, but I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton. He's going to win this race. I'm going to then put Valtteri Bottas in second, and I'm going to have Max Verstappen in third. I think I may have overshot my bold prediction already, but that's just honestly my opinion. And that's not even with Lewis Hamilton bias, because I'm not even a Lewis Hamilton fan. So now we go on to our bold predictions. I may have jumped the gun, as I said, but Steve, bold prediction for tomorrow's race.
I think, I'm not sure if you count this as a bold prediction or not, but I think this will be the race that determines the outcome of third place, and I think it'll be Ferrari. I think they've taken a decent chunk out of McLaren now, and I think that this is where that fight will swing heavily in their favour. I've got an odd feeling that Norris will either struggle or just sort of loiter about where he is at the moment, and both Ferraris will, progress further down the road. And Ricciardo, I don't know if he's that much of a threat tomorrow, but I'll happily be proven wrong, as I'm more of a McLaren fan than I am a Ferrari fan. But that is my bold prediction, if you want to count that as one. If you want a really straightforward one, Seb for points.
Tom?
This is a bold prediction, isn't it? Yeah. Sorry, I was thinking, then I completely zoned out. I'm quite tired. McLaren get no constructors' points, and Ferrari extend their lead over them.
Mine, I was going to go with Latifi to finish ahead of Russell again. I'm going to say he's going to have the clean sheet over Russell this weekend. I reckon he's going to do it, and it's going to be it's going to stoke all the rumours for Latifi to Mercedes once Lewis Hamilton retires. But so that's all from us today. If you are watching the show live, you'll know that we live stream all our shows, but if you are listening to it after we've already published it, just know that we do live stream all of our shows. So if you subscribe to the F1 Grid Talk podcast on YouTube, you get to see all the shows as they're made, and you can also ask us questions in the comments for the after show. So make sure to subscribe and check that out. We're also available on Spotify, Apple Music, on Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Omni Studio, Verbal, as well as the F1 Chronicle website. Just search for the F1 Grid Talk podcast. We have an absolutely massive back catalogue of shows. This is episode 150. So if you're stuck for something to listen to, well, between now and the race tomorrow, we have tons of shows for you to listen to, not just race and qualifying reviews, but we also have interviews with Mario Zola from Pirelli, as well as more documentary style shows about Tiregate, Ayrton Senna, and the 1994 Benson conspiracy. So feel free to check them out. We also have a Patreon, so if you'd like to support the podcast and help towards better mics, lights, and better recording equipment for our host, any support is greatly appreciated. Also, if you give us a 5-star review on iTunes, then you'll get a shout out on our next show. Any feedback on our podcast is great. So please, if you do have time to leave us a 5-star review, that would just be amazing. Now it's time to hear from Tom and Steve, where you can see more from them. So, Tom, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, so I'm part of the Everything F1 team. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that good stuff. On Instagram, we are at Everything F1 _. On Facebook, we have a Facebook page, which you can find Everything F1. We have our group, which is the Everything F1 Paddock. We have our YouTube channel, which we've recently relaunched and is growing nicely, which is Everything F1. Then we also have our website, which, as you might have guessed, is everythingf1.com. And last but by no means least, we have our podcast, which is the Everything F1 podcast, which is available on Apple, Spotify, Amazon Music, our websites, all your favorite podcasting locations.
And Steve?
Formula Shakedown, Facebook, join. It's good. It's Formula One stuff. I'm actually going to use this if I can do a bit of a shout out of my own, actually. And it's for a bloke on two wheels, but he has tested in Formula One cars 3 times before. Valentino Rossi, after 432 Grand Prix starts, 199 podiums and 115 wins, 89 of them in the Premier class, he is hanging up his boots and helmet this weekend at Valencia. So if you are a MotoGP fan, you will probably be crying with me at around 3 tomorrow morning New Zealand time. If you're not a MotoGP fan, watch it anyway, because it's a once-in-a-lifetime thing. This is history. He's been doing this for 26 years or something stupid like that. He's basically as old as MotoGP is. He's been around since the modern format began. So it's incredible to think it's ending. He isn't giving up racing altogether. He's off to race GT cars next year for Ferrari or Porsche or whoever wants him. I think anyone will happily take him just for the publicity alone. But he almost did a switch to Formula One back in 2011 for Ferrari as well. That was something that almost came to fruition. It was very close to becoming reality. So he's a phenomenal human being. And for one last time, Forza Vale.
I definitely go along with that. I was very lucky enough to see Valentino's very last British Grand Prix at Silverstone this year, which was an absolute pleasure to witness. And he is such an icon of MotoGP. The race is a bit later than usual, especially for us in Europe. So definitely check that out. But thank you, Tom and Steve, for joining me today.
Pleasure as always.
Thank you.
So we'll be back tomorrow at 8 p.m. UK time to review the actual Sao Paulo Grand Prix race, not the sprint race, qualifying, whatever this is. So thank you so much for watching or listening. Make sure to join us tomorrow. Goodbye.
Bye.
Took a while to stop.
Ray, big success.
Oh. Do you know what's not a big success?
What?
Just before we started this, I did a lateral flow test.
Oh no.
Again.
Okay.
I've got it for a second time. COVID.
Oh, Christ. What? When did you find that out? Were we recording when?
About 10 minutes before we started recording, I did the dob on it. And it's just... it's
sorry,
here.
mate.
Uh,
Are you feeling all right, or did you just do it as a precaution, or are you a bit under the weather?
No, I felt under the weather, so I did it. And
yeah,
because I feel really sort of like blocked in here, and my head is a bit sort of like, well,
yeah.
So I got to book one of the proper government ones now. But if lateral flow is pinged up, then it's a good chance I'm riddled.
Yeah. Oh Christ. Sorry, mate.
Sorry.
I've been actually fortunate not to get it so far.
Yeah, this is just it's Yeah, this is very much an endemic thing now. This is not going away. Yeah, I mean, I'm same as you, Louis. I've been lucky enough to dodge it so far, but it is now spreading throughout New Zealand. It'll be here where I live pretty soon. I am fully vaccinated, which is lucky. But even if you're fully vaccinated, it can still, give you a bit of a runaround. But it just usually means no hospitalisation. Fingers crossed. Yeah, sorry, Tom. That's shit.
Sorry. Suppose we starting a new job on Monday.
Well, can you work from home?
I can, but I'm supposed to be going to Bristol, which is a good hour away from Cardiff, where I live.
Yeah. Oh dear. That's Although you don't have to go to Bristol, so
no, every cloud has a silver lining.
It does.
Yeah.
Oh dear. We stopped there for one night back in 2018 on the way back from Scotland, and we just couldn't manage the rest of the drive back to London in a day. So, stopped in Bristol for the night, and my partner loved it. She was terrified. We decided to go out and get dinner. It was Saturday night. About by the time we actually woke up again, I think the only things that were open was a local McDonald's, a couple of kebab shops, and an Aldi. And we thought the safe bet would be the Aldi. And it's,
standard British Saturday night.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. The only thing that was open was Aldi, and the first thing you see is this absolutely knackered bloke. Like he's properly sourced. I don't know how much he's drunk, but the bar is probably completely dry, and he's staggering around with what I think it was like a broken woman's high heel, and he's chasing after, I think, the owner of said high heel, screaming profanities at her whilst being chased by a police officer. So it was, it was a good time. Cheers, Bristol. I loved it. I'm never coming back.
It's nice to know that you had a good impression.
Oh dear.
Anyway.
Should we talk about Jeddah then, and whether it's actually happening? Because I'm going to say 10 quid. It's not. I don't think it'll happen. I don't think it's going to be ready.
I'd be willing to put money on that it will happen, purely on the fact that they are going to, like, the Saudi government kind of need this. Like, they need this sort of event to work.
Because when is it? Like, it's got.
So is it 3 weeks away? I want to say 3-4 weeks away.
Yeah, 3rd to the 5th of December. Because we've got Qatar next weekend, don't we?
Yeah.
Because it's the last race in this triple header, and they've got a week off.
I just got to say, for the record, this is the dumbest triple header. When you could have just done Austin, Mexico, Brazil as a triple header, rather than
and then week off, and then the Middle East triple header.
Yeah, this is.
But this is Formula One. It doesn't have to make sense. Bear that in mind. It doesn't have to make sense. Bear in mind, like, considering what we've just witnessed, which was a not race, it doesn't have to make sense at all.
Yeah. I mean, genuinely dumb.
Look at 2022, right? We're coming to the Americas 3 times, if not 4.
It's so scattered.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
I guarantee as well that Miami Grand Prix is going to be about as successful as the Vegas Grand Prix back in the 70s. It's just it's a car park. It's a 300 and something kilometre-an-hour car park. It's going to be rubbish. I'm not on board with this obsession with street circuits that Liberty has suddenly developed. It's not doing it for me at all.
It's kind of like Formula E's model, with it's rather than you go to the race comes to you, and it's in the heart of the city.
Yeah.
You know, most of the time it isn't in the heart of the city. But they're trying.
And you've
to
almost got to wonder if that's the market that they're trying to sort of tap into, because Formula E is, for as much crap as it gets, it's pretty successful. Yeah, it's very successful. Yeah.
Like, I don't watch it, and it's not like out of principle I don't watch it. To me, it's glorified bumper cars.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem. There is the circuits that they use is just they're too narrow.
Yeah. But I have to give credit to Formula E because even though I don't watch it, I follow Formula E on most social medias. I'm vaguely familiar of always what happens because it's so well marketed and it has, despite what some racing fans might think of it, it does an incredible job. And there's always talk around it. Like you don't see in Formula One stuff like what Lucas de Grassi decided to do at the London Grand Prix, just go through the pit lane under the safety car to get ahead. You don't see that in Formula One.
I think I unfollowed Formula E and a few other pages for that for a few days, just purely because the level of salt that was that was being mined in those pages was just oh. I can taste it now. It's disgusting. It's. I mean, Formula E has done a very good job of marketing itself and appealing to the more casual fans. So I think, if you consider that Formula One's been trying to do the same thing for a wee while now with DTS, and now they're doing street circuits, sort of, every weekend or every second weekend. Basically, it's they're definitely going for the more, or they're trying to appeal to the casual audience while still trying to appease the people who've been watching it for a few seasons now, if not longer. So, tricky balance to achieve, I think.
Yeah, but the problem is that these street circuits that they're going to, they're not exactly like the ones that people, like maybe bar Miami, they're not really tracks that people are going to be wanting to go to because, like, when you really going to fly out to Azerbaijan to watch a race, you're going to fly to Sochi or Jeddah to go watch a street race, or even
I've never thought to myself, I'm going to go on holiday. Sochi sounds nice this time of year.
Even though it's like Russia's summer resort, though. Like, that's what Sochi is.
I want to go and see a disused Olympic stadium. That's that appeals to me. Russia's getting a new circuit, though, isn't it? We're going to St. Petersburg.
Yeah, and I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah,
most glorious and honourable and benevolent Russian Grand Prix.
No, I thought that was North Korea.
Oh, that's the North Korean Grand Prix that we're trying to pitch, isn't it?
Yeah, the one where the one where Kim Jong Un wins the race. All right. Here's a discussion point for you, and if anybody in the chat is still there, Max got fined 50k for fingering the Mercedes. Paraphrase.
Yeah,
I was watching a video earlier of Seb when he goes around inspecting. Now we've seen Seb do it many a time before. We've seen him push wheels, which that they're not a car specific component, but there's a clip of him from between either 2015 or 16, because they were before we had the super wide cars, and he was in Ferrari gear going up. I think it was 2015, looking at the paint job, but it doesn't really matter. Going up to one of the Red Bulls and putting his hands on the side pod. Now, even leaving him touching the wheels out of it, why do you think it's only today that when Verstappen put his hands on the back of the Mercedes that something was actually done about it, or he was even summoned?
I think I've had a chat about this to other people. I think the only reason why it's become a thing is because that the specific part that he touched was under investigation.
Yeah.
And B, it wasn't even actually like brought about until
that amateur footage came about.
Yeah, until one of the fans posted it. It was never picked up because no one seems to mention the fact that a lot of people don't seem to mention the fact that Max did it to his own car first.
And then went over. He
didn't just go to the Mercedes. Like a lot of people, a lot of people seem to think that, he's gone over to tamper with the Mercedes DRS thing. Anyone who thinks that's an idiot, because he isn't. He went over to his own car first. Clearly, someone on his in-lap had told him, or
something's going on,
because it appears that Adrian Newey saw something because of this discreet conversation he's had with the FIA. So clearly someone's mentioned it to Max, told him to have a look, because it happens. They do teams like Sebastian Vettel, he's done it a lot, regardless of the team he's driven for. He's always having a look at others' cars. And they probably just asked Max, can you check the DRS slot on the Mercedes? And if he wants to get a sort of a good reference of the difference, obviously he's going to check his first.
He's going to put his finger in and go, okay, I've got that much wiggle room. He's going to then go over to the Mercedes and go whoop, and then see how that looks wrong, and then see how much wiggle room is in the Mercedes.
Yeah. I think the only reason why he's been fined / reprimanded, which fair enough, he was in breach of the sporting regulations. You can't argue against it.
I'm not arguing against it at all.
Yeah. I know a lot of people. F1 Twitter is a horrible place when it comes to any battle between. There's a reason.
Everyone's on there. Everyone who's on there is nice to each other. There's never any arguments or death threats. It's a wholesome place.
Yeah.
I mean, I really tapped into the Lewis Hamilton sort of aspect of F1 Twitter earlier, because I tweeted out midway through the sprint race. I went, I'm sure Red Bull will be demanding to check Lewis's rear wing after he's making it look so easy to overtake people. And literally all the likes and all the retweets have come from like Lewis Hamilton stan pages.
Yeah. The comment from Bono, especially afterwards, just make sure you don't hand on the rear wing.
Has anyone seen Sebastian Vettel did the same thing?
Yeah. He said I might touch the front wing.
He went,
because it's cheaper. It's only 25 grand.
Yeah. So I just there were some things that I've seen crop up on social media that if anyone's listening and there's some confusion around who makes these decisions and why, I'll clear it up for you. A lot of people said that the reason that Max got fined today is because we don't have Charlie Whiting anymore. We have Michael Massey. Michael Massey has nothing to do with stewarding decisions. He is the race director.
Thank you.
If it's a stewarding decision, it's the stewards. He's not a steward. I just want to make that very clear, because a lot of people said, if Charlie Whiting was here, this wouldn't happen.
If Charlie Whiting was here, it would make a blind bit of difference.
No, it wouldn't matter, because the stewards are the stewards, the race director is the race director. Yes, they do consult with each other when it comes to stewarding decisions relating to something that happened during the race or vice versa. But they, for the purposes of this sort of investigation, Michael Massey is not involved. It would be very strange if he was. But that's the end of it. But with the fine, I think the reason he got stung is precedence. I think a lot of it is now precedence. So with the sort of some of what's happened this season has been very, very on the nose. And I'm not so Silverstone was an accident. I'm not going to sit here and say that Lewis punted Max off or anything like that.
He didn't.
However, if we look at what happened at Monza, that was a little bit sketchier. That was, I don't think that was either driver wanting to take the other one out. I think that was basically Max and Lewis both wanting to put each other into a position where they, where
someone had
basically
to back out. Yeah.
It was the Ayrton Senna complex. You put yourself in a position where you either force the other driver to back off or you crash. Yeah. And if they back off, then you're in their head. But with the fine, I think it's just precedence to point out that they are going to start cracking down on having a sort of inspection of other drivers' cars and that sort of thing. And it's not to say that this will be like a constant. If it's just a simple,
someone just goes over and just has a nosy.
That's fine.
Sorry, Steve.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're okay. But that's exactly it. If you poke your head into the cockpit of another car, but you're not actually touching it, I mean, good luck with the halo in the way now. But something like that, or if you're just looking at the condition of another driver's, another car's tires or that sort of thing, that's fine. I think with Seb doing the whole, using his foot to roll the Mercedes forward, and what race was it? It was back in 2017. I can't remember which race it was, but there's video of him rolling the Mercedes forward with the left rear tyre with his foot. But that's, I believe there is a loophole there in which a tyre is not a vehicle-specific component. It's a tyre. It's a control tyre as well, so it does not matter. But with the whole hand-on side pod, having a look at someone's rear wing, front wing, what they had for breakfast. I mean, I think this has now just gotten to the point where they are starting to crack down on it, because it can lead to situations where, there was potential for this whole thing to be written off, because if Mercedes were able to successfully argue that Max broke their rear wing somehow, then that would have been thrown out. But again, that's impossible. These rear wings are designed to handle hundreds of kilos of
come on to that,
of resistance. That, like, they're designed to handle incredible loads. So unless Max is downed a million Red Bulls that morning and then just gone to stuff with Lewis's rear wing afterwards, it's just not going to happen. So I think it purely just comes down to precedence and just sort of cracking down on unnecessary handling of cars, which can cause some headaches for other teams, especially if there's if there's a bit of damage on a side pod that a team doesn't identify through data or through having a look at the car when it's in a stop, and they don't pick up on it until well after the race, and one of the drivers has been hanging around their side pod or that sort of thing, they could go to that team and say, hey, your driver has broken a control vane on our side pod. Here's a bill for £3 million or whatever it is. So yeah, it's just I think that's all it is. But hey, look, if that £50,000 fine wins them the championship, then that's a very cheap way of winning, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just got a few bits to add from that. The first thing is obviously about the actual sort of punishment itself, and obviously it's a monetary thing and it wasn't a grid drop. I agree with that, because what Max didn't have any bearing on where either driver finished in that qualifying session. So I think a grid drop wouldn't have been the right thing. But on the flip side, how much is a monetary fine of €50,000 really going to affect Verstappen? Right, I'm leaning in because I got it on my other screen. I've got the FIA document open from Max. Now, the bit to note about setting a precedent, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Steve, is I'm just going to read a quick extract from this at the bottom. It says, considering the fact that no direct harm was caused in this case, in the opinion of the steward, and that no earlier precedent of penalties for this exists, there is a breach of the regulation and has potential for serious consequences on the other. The steward is determined to take action in this case in order to fine, blah, blah, blah. It says, but then the point it says after, the stewards further note that it is intended that all teams and drivers take notice that future breaches may incur different penalties from the stewards of those events. So what you're saying, Steve, about this setting a precedent is absolutely right. And the FIA documents with the sporting and technical regulations have a lot of these sort of little clauses in them, which can easily get arguably swept under the radar, because there are so many intricate little things to police. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of all of them. With regards to Max actually breaking the rear wing, the Mercedes fans that I saw saying that, get a grip, hun. That rear wing is designed to handle 10 tons of downforce. Unless Max literally injected taurine into his eyeballs, he is not going to be able to exert 10 tons of pressure of downforce onto that rear wing. Granted, on the flip side, if he'd have pushed it up, we could have had a different story. But given the materials these cars are made out of and how phenomenally strong they are, for a driver to be able to go over and break that, and for a driver to do that intentionally, no. No. That wouldn't happen. I don't think there's any driver on the grid who has that much malice in them in a championship fight that they would destroy a rival's car. Think about how well recorded F1 is, how much coverage there is. This Max thing came about from amateur footage. Imagine if he'd gone over and then sort of just sat there, because we saw him have a sort of bit of a play. Imagine if he just stood there with his tongue hanging out, just going like that, having a go. I think someone would have noticed what was going on. So no, he didn't go over there to break it. Have a word with yourself.
Yeah, I think people need to understand also, well, one thing, the mechanism that opens the DRS is probably stronger than what Max could probably put through that thing anyway.
Exactly.
and two, these cars arrived incredibly late on Thursday, to the point where the FIA had to ignore the curfew that's usually put in place for the teams to get their car set up ready for Friday. These cars were delayed. They were stuck on freighters, and they weren't able to get to the track as quickly as usual. So, that means that these cars were, well, I'm not going to say hastily put together, but they were put together probably a bit more frantically and probably less organized, and ignore a sort of standard procedure than usual. So errors like this are not, completely uncommon. And as the FIA and Mercedes have said, this component in the car has been tested numerous times. I think it was like 4 times in the past, and has been completely fine each time. I think it's just the pure fact that it just wasn't fitted correctly, and it allows for a little bit more room.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, with the way that teams ship parts, there is a common misconception that they'll just follow the actual team personnel, as they go to each race. A lot of the teams, basically every team has what they call garages, and these garages are all packed up into containers and that sort of thing, and they will typically leapfrog them. So the components that were in America at COTA may not necessarily have been the components that we had at Mexico. They'll be from the race prior to COTA, and they'll sort of leapfrog them and that sort of thing. And they do that for the very, to try and avoid the situation that we just had, which is where stuff gets delayed and parts don't arrive and so on and so forth. But if you remember what happened at COTA, we had rear wing failures. So there is a possibility that the rear wing that Mercedes had on their car was from COTA, and we had cracks on the main planes of both Red Bulls. We had an upright failure, a rear wing upright failure on one of the Alpines. Was it Fernando who retired? I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah. So
didn't Alpine have a double DNF in Austin? Both.
No, they did. They did. I think
both through the same issue.
Yeah, with the same issue. So, Mercedes didn't have any sort of. There weren't any apparent concerns with their rear wings at the time. I think they did some cautionary testing and just strengthening in places, not as liberally as Red Bull did. But there is a possibility that there was some fatigue or an issue with that rear wing that they may not have picked up on that was present at COTA. Whether I'm right or not, I don't know, but it's just it's something to bear in mind. But with the way that they ship these garages around, it's unusual that it would go from directly from one race to another. It'll be a garage prior to that that's set up and ready to go to the next race. Because bearing in mind as well, the rear wing that they have at COTA may not be the rear wing that they have at Mexico, and so on and so forth. So it's all planned very far in advance, but there could have just been some issues from COTA that have come back to bite them with their rear wing.
Yeah. I think we'll finish this up now because it's just been almost 2 hours. I imagine Jared and the editor will probably want this audio to get this out as soon as. So and then stop streaming. So anyone who is still with us on the stream, thank you for being with us, and thank you for all your comments. I saw a lot of comments today, a lot more than usual. So